achieved by such as are of a bold and manly spirit, whereas Telenes is said by those who dwell about Sicily to have been a soft-hearted and womanish person. He, however, obtained this office in the manner above described. Afterwards, on the death of Cleander, the son of Pantares, who was slain by Sabillus, a citizen of Gela, after he had held the tyranny for 7 years, Hippocrates, Cleander's brother, mounted the throne. During his reign, Gelo, a descendant of the high priest Telenes, served with many others, of whom Anesidemus, the son of Pataiacus, was one, in the king's bodyguard. Within a little time his merit caused him to be raised to the command of all the horse. For when Hippocrates laid siege to Callipolis, and afterwards to Naxos, to Zancli, to Leontini, and moreover to Syracuse, and many cities of the barbarians, Gelo in every war distinguished himself above all the combatants. Of the various cities above named there was none but Syracuse, which was not reduced to slavery. The Syracusans were saved from this fate after they had suffered defeat on the river Elorus by the Corinthians and Corcyraeans, who made peace between them and Hippocrates on condition of their ceding Camarina to him, for that city anciently belonged to Syracuse. When, however, Hippocrates, after a reign of the same length as that of Cleander his brother, perished near the city of Hybla, as he was warring with the native Sicilians, then Gelo, pretending to espouse the cause of the 2 sons of Hippocrates, Euclides and Cleander, defeated the citizens who were seeking to recover their freedom, and having done so, set aside the children, and himself took the kingly power. After this piece of good fortune, Gelo likewise became master of Syracuse, and in the following manner. The Syracusan landholders, as they were called, had been driven from their city by the common people, assisted by their own slaves, the Ciliarians, and had fled to Casmene. Gelo brought them back to Syracuse, and so got possession of the town, for the people surrendered themselves and gave up their city on his approach. Being now master of Syracuse, Gelo cared less to govern Gela, which he therefore entrusted to his brother Hiero, while he strengthened the defences of his new city, which indeed was now all in all to him. And Syracuse sprang up rapidly to power, and became a flourishing place. For Gelo razed Camarina to the ground, and brought all the inhabitants to Syracuse, and made them citizens. He also brought thither more than half the citizens of Gela, and gave them the same rights as the Camarinians. So likewise with the Megarians of Sicily. After besieging their town and forcing them to surrender, he took the rich men, who, having made the war, looked now for nothing less than death at his hands, and carrying them to Syracuse, established them there as citizens, while the common people, who, as they had not taken any share in the struggle, felt secure that no harm would be done to them. He carried likewise to Syracuse, where he sold them all as slaves to be conveyed abroad. He did the like also by the Euboeans of Sicily, making the same difference. His conduct towards both nations arose from his belief that a people was a most unpleasant companion. In this way, Gelo became a great king. When the Greek envoys reached Syracuse and were admitted to an audience, they spoke as follows. "We've been sent hither by the Lacedaemonians and Athenians, with their respective allies, to ask thee to join us against the barbarian. Doubtless thou hast heard of his invasion, and art aware that a Persian is about to throw a bridge over the Hellespont, and bringing with him out of Asia all the forces of the East to carry war into Greece, professing indeed that he only seeks to attack Athens, but really bent on bringing all the Greeks into subjection. Do thou therefore, we beseech thee, aid those who would maintain the freedom of Greece, and thyself assist to free her, since the power which thou wieldest is great, and thy portion in Greece, as lord of Sicily, is no small one. For if all Greece join together in one, there will be a mighty host collected, and we shall be a match for our assailants. But if some turn traitors, and others refuse their aid, and only a small part of the whole body remains sound, then there's reason to fear that all Greece may perish. For do not thou cherish a hope that the Persian, when he has conquered our country, will be content, and not advance against thee. Rather take thy measures beforehand, and consider that thou defendest thyself when thou givest aid to us. Wise counsels, be sure, for the most part, have prosperous issues. Thus spake the envoys, and Gelo replied with vehemence, Greeks, ye have had the face to come here with selfish words, and exhort me to join in league with you against the barbarian. Yet when I herewhile asked you to join with me in fighting barbarians, what time the quarrel broke out between me and Carthage, and when I earnestly besought you to revenge on the men of Egesta their murder of Darius, the son of Anaxandridas, promising to assist you in setting free the trading places from which you receive great profits and advantages, you neither came hither to give me succor, nor yet to revenge Darius. But for any efforts on your part to hinder it, these countries might at this time have been entirely under the barbarians. Now, however, that matters have prospered and gone well with me, while the danger has shifted its ground, and at present threatens yourselves, lo, you call Gelo to mind. But though ye slighted me then, I will not imitate you now. I am ready to give you aid, and to furnish as my contribution 200 triremes, 20,000 men-at-arms, 2,000 cavalry, and an equal number of archers, slingers, and light horsemen, together with corn for the whole Grecian army, so long as the war shall last. These services, however, I promise on one condition, that ye appoint me chief captain and commander of the Grecian forces during the war with the barbarian. Unless ye agree to this, I will neither send succors nor come myself. Syagris, when he heard these words, was unable to contain himself, and exclaimed, Surely a groan would burst from Pelops' son Agamemnon, did he hear that her leadership was snatched from Sparta by Gelo and the men of Syracuse. Speak then no more of any such condition as that we should yield thee the chief command, but if thou art minded to come to the aid of Greece, prepare to serve under Lacedaemonian generals. Wilt thou not serve under a leader? Then, prithee, withhold thy succours. Hereupon Gelo, seeing the indignation which showed itself in the words of Syagris, delivered the envoys his final offer. Spartan stranger, he said, reproaches cast forth against a man are wont to provoke him to anger, but the insults which thou hast uttered in thy speech shall not persuade me to outstep good breeding in my answer. Surely if you maintain so stoutly your right to the command, it's reasonable that I should be still more stiff in maintaining mine, forasmuch as I am at the head of a far larger fleet and army. Since, however, the claim which I have put forward is so displeasing to you, I will yield, and be content with less. Take, if it please you, the command of the land force, and I will be admiral of the fleet. Or assume, if you prefer it, the command by sea, and I will be leader upon the land. Unless you are satisfied with these terms, you must return home by yourselves and lose this great alliance. Such was the offer which Gelo made. Hereat broke in the Athenian envoy, before the Spartan could answer, and thus addressed Gelo, King of the Syracusans, Greece sent us here to thee, to ask for an army, and not to ask for a general. Thou, however, dost not promise to send us any army at all, if thou art not made leader of the Greeks. And this command is what alone thou sticklest for. Now when thy request was to have the whole command, we were content to keep silence, for well we knew that we might trust the Spartan envoy to make answer for us both. But since, after failing in thy claim to lead the whole armament, thou hast now put forward a request to have the command of the fleet, know that even should the Spartan envoy consent to this, we will not consent. The command by sea, if the Lacedaemonians do not wish for it, belongs to us. While they like to keep this command, we shall raise no dispute, but we will not yield our right to it in favour of anyone else. Where would be the advantage of our having raised up a naval force greater than that of any other Greek people, if nevertheless we should suffer Syracusans to take the command away from us? From us, I say, who are Athenians, the most ancient nation in Greece, the only Greeks who have never changed their abode, the people who are said by the poet Homer to have sent to Troy the man best able of all the Greeks to array and marshal an army, so that we may be allowed to boast somewhat. Gelo replied, Athenian stranger, ye have, it seems, no lack of commanders, but ye are likely to lack men to receive their orders. As ye are resolved to yield nothing and claim everything, ye had best make haste back to Greece and say that the spring of her year is lost to her. The meaning of this expression was the following. As the spring is manifestly the finest season of the year, so, he meant to say, were his troops the finest of the Greek army. Greece, therefore, deprived of his alliance, would be like a year with the spring taken from it. Then the Greek envoys, without having any further dealings with Gelo, sailed away home. And Gelo, who feared that the Greeks would be too weak to withstand the barbarians, and yet couldn't anyhow bring himself to go to the Peloponnese, and there, though king of Sicily, serve under the Lacedaemonians, left off altogether to contemplate that course of action, and betook himself to quite a different plan. As soon as ever tidings reached him of the passage of the Hellespont by the Persians, he sent off 3 Pentaconters under the command of Cadmus, the son of Sithus, a native of Kos, who was to go to Delphi, taking with him a large sum of money and a stock of friendly words. There he was to watch the war and see what turn it would take. If the barbarians prevailed, he was to give Xerxes the treasure, and with it earth and water for the lands which Gelo ruled. If the Greeks won the day, he was to convey the treasure back. This Cadmus had at an earlier time received from his father the kingly power at Kos in a right good condition, and had of his own free will and without the approach of any danger, from pure love of justice, given up his power into the hands of the people at large, and departed to Sicily, where he assisted in the Samian seizure and settlement of Zancli, or Messana as it was afterwards called. Upon this occasion Gelo chose him to send into Greece, because he was acquainted with the proofs of honesty which he had given, and now he added to his former honourable deeds an action which isn't the least of his merits. With a vast sum entrusted to him and completely in his power, so that he might have kept it for his own use if he had liked, he didn't touch it. But when the Greeks gained the sea fight and Xerxes fled away with his army, he brought the whole treasure back with him to Sicily. They, however, who dwell in Sicily say that Gelo, though he knew that he must serve under the Lacedaemonians, would nevertheless have come to the aid of the Greeks had it not been for Terillus, the son of Crenippus, king of Himera, who, driven from his city by Thero, the son of Anicedemus, king of Agrigentum, brought into Sicily at this very time an army of 300,000 men, Phoenicians, Libyans, Iberians, Ligurians, Helicinians, Sardinians, and Corsicans, under the command of Hamilcar, the son of Hanno, king of the Carthaginians. Terillus prevailed upon Hamilcar, partly as his sworn friend, but more through the zealous aid of Anaxilaus, the son of Cretenes, king of Rhegium, who, by giving his own sons to Hamilcar as hostages, induced him to make the expedition. Anaxilaus herein served his own father-in-law, for he was married to a daughter of Terillus, by name Sidippe. So, as Gelo couldn't give the Greeks any aid, he sent, they say, the sum of money to Delphi. They say, too, that the victory of Gelo and Thero in Sicily over Hamilcar the Carthaginian fell out upon the very day that the Greeks defeated the Persians at Salamis. Hamilcar, who was a Carthaginian on his father's side only, but on his mother's a Syracusan, and who had been raised by his merit to the throne of Carthage after the battle and the defeat, as I am informed, disappeared from sight. Gelo made the strictest search for him, but he couldn't be found anywhere, either dead or alive. The Carthaginians, who take probability for their guide, give the following account of this matter. Hamilcar, they say, during all the time that the battle raged between the Greeks and the barbarians, which was from early dawn till evening, remained in the camp, sacrificing and seeking favourable omens, while he burned on a huge pyre the entire bodies of the victims which he offered. Here, as he poured libations upon the sacrifices, he saw the rout of his army, whereupon he cast himself headlong into the flames, and so was consumed and disappeared. But whether Hamilcar's disappearance happened, as the Phoenicians tell us, in this way, or as the Syracusans maintain in some other, certain it is that the Carthaginians offer him sacrifice, and in all their colonies have monuments erected to his honour, as well as one which is the grandest of all at Carthage. Thus much concerning the affairs of Sicily. As for the Corcyraeans, whom the envoys that visited Sicily took in their way, and to whom they delivered the same message as to Gelo, their answers and actions were the following. With great readiness they promised to come and give their help to the Greeks, declaring that the ruin of Greece was a thing which they couldn't tamely stand by to see, for should she fall, they must the very next day submit to slavery, so that they were bound to assist her to the very uttermost of their power. But notwithstanding that they answered so smoothly, yet when the time came for the succours to be sent, they were of quite a different kind, and though they manned 60 ships, it was long ere they put to sea with them, and when they had so done, they went no further than the Peloponnese, where they lay to with their fleet off the Lacedaemonian coast, about Pylos and Tynerum, like Gelo watching to see what turn the war would take. For they despaired altogether of the Greeks gaining the day, and expected that the Persians would win a great battle, and then be masters of the whole of Greece. They therefore acted, as I've said, in order that they might be able to address Xerxes in words like these: O king, though the Greeks sought to obtain our aid in their war with thee, and though we had a force of no small size, and could have furnished a greater number of ships than any Greek state except Athens, yet we refused, since we couldn't fight against thee, nor do aught to cause thee annoyance. The Corcyraeans hoped that a speech like this would gain them better treatment from the Persians than the rest of the Greeks, and it would have done so, in my judgment. At the same time, they had an excuse ready to give their countrymen, which they used when the time came. Reproached by them for sending no succours, they replied that they had fitted out a fleet of 60 triremes, but that the Etesian winds didn't allow them to double Cape Malea, and this hindered them from reaching Salamis. It wasn't from any bad motive that they had missed the sea fight. In this way the Corcyraeans eluded the reproaches of the Greeks. The Cretans, when the envoys sent to ask aid from them came and made their request, acted as follows. They dispatched messengers in the name of their state, of Delphi, and asked the god whether it would make for their welfare if they should lend succour to Greece. Fools, replied the Pythoness, do ye not still complain of the woes which the assisting of Menelaus cost you at the hands of angry Minos? How wroth was he when, in spite of their having lent you no aid towards avenging his death at Chamicus, you helped them to avenge the carrying off by a barbarian of a woman from Sparta? When this answer was brought from Delphi to the Cretans, they thought no more of assisting the Greeks. Minos, according to tradition, went to Sicania, or Sicily, as it's now called, in search of Daedalus, and there perished by a violent death. After a while, the Cretans, warned by some god or other, made a great expedition into Sicania, all except the Polymnians and the Prysians, and besieged Chamicus, which in my time belonged to Agrigentum, by the space of 5 years. At last, however, failing in their efforts to take the place and unable to carry on the siege any longer from the pressure of hunger, they departed and went their way. Voyaging homewards, they had reached Iapygia, when a furious storm arose and threw them upon the coast. All their vessels were broken in pieces, and so, as they saw no means of returning to Crete, they founded the town of Heria, where they took up their abode, changing their name from Cretans to Messapian Iapygians, and at the same time becoming inhabitants of the mainland instead of islanders. From Heria they afterwards founded those other towns which the Tarentines at a much later period endeavoured to take, but couldn't, being defeated signally. Indeed, so dreadful a slaughter of Greeks never happened at any other time, so far as my knowledge extends, nor was it only the Tarentines who suffered, but the men of Rhegium too, who had been forced to go to the aid of the Tarentines by Micathus, the son of Coirus, lost here 3,000 of their citizens, while the number of the Tarentines who fell was beyond all count. This Micathus had been a household slave of Anaxilaus, and was by him left in charge of Rhegium. He's the same man who was afterwards forced to leave Rhegium when he settled at Tegea in Arcadia, from which place he made his many offerings of statues to the shrine at Olympia. This account of the Rhegians and the Tarentines is a digression from the story which I was relating. To return, the Pisans say that men of various nations now flocked to Crete, which was stripped of its inhabitants, but none came in such numbers as the Grecians. 3 generations after the death of Minos, the Trojan War took place, and the Cretans weren't the least distinguished among the helpers of Menelaus, but on this account, when they came back from Troy, famine and pestilence fell upon them, and destroyed both the men and the cattle. Crete was a second time stripped of its inhabitants, a remnant only being left, who formed, together with fresh settlers, the 3rd Cretan people by whom the island has been inhabited. These were the events of which the Pythoness now reminded the men of Crete, and thereby she prevented them from giving the Greeks aid, though they wished to have gone to their assistance. The Thessalians didn't embrace the cause of the Medes until they were forced to do so, for they gave plain proof that the intrigues of the Aleuadae weren't at all to their liking. No sooner did they hear that the Persian was about to cross over into Europe than they dispatched envoys to the Greeks, who were met to consult together at the Isthmus, whither all the states, which were well inclined to the Grecian cause, had sent their delegates. These envoys, on their arrival, thus addressed their countrymen: "Men of Greece, it behoves you to guard the pass of Olympus, for thus will Thessaly be placed in safety, as well as the rest of Greece. We, for our parts, are quite ready to take our share in this work, but you must likewise send us a strong force, otherwise we give you fair warning that we shall make terms with the Persians, for we ought not to be left, exposed as we are in front of all the rest of Greece, to die in your defence, alone and unassisted. If, however, you don't choose to send us aid, you can't force us to resist the enemy, for there's no force so strong as inability. We shall therefore do our best to secure our own safety." Such was the declaration of the Thessalians. Hereupon the Greeks determined to send a body of foot to Thessaly by sea, which should defend the pass of Olympus. Accordingly a force was collected, which passed up the Euripus, and disembarking at Alus on the coast of Achaia, left the ships there and marched by land into Thessaly. Here they occupied the defile of Tempe, which leads from Lower Macedonia into Thessaly along the course of the Peneus, having the range of Olympus on the one hand and Ossa upon the other. In this place the Greek force that had been collected amounted to about 10,000 heavy-armed men, pitched their camp, and here they were joined by the Thessalian cavalry. The commanders were, on the part of the Lacedaemonians, Evanitus, the son of Carinus, who had been chosen out of the Polemarchs, but didn't belong to the blood royal, and on the part of the Athenians, Themistocles, the son of Neocles. They didn't, however, maintain their station for more than a few days, since envoys came from Alexander, the son of Amyntas, the Macedonian, and counselled them to decamp from Tempe, telling them that if they remained in the pass they would be trodden underfoot by the invading army, whose numbers they recounted, and likewise the multitude of their ships. So when the envoys thus counselled them, and the counsel seemed to be good, and the Macedonian who sent it friendly, they did even as he advised. In my opinion, what chiefly wrought on them was the fear that the Persians might enter by another pass, whereof they now heard, which led from Upper Macedonia into Thessaly through the territory of the Peraebi, and by the town of Gonus, the pass by which soon afterwards the army of Xerxes actually made its entrance. The Greeks therefore went back to their ships and sailed away to the isthmus. Such were the circumstances of the expedition into Thessaly. They took place when the king was at Abydos, preparing to pass from Asia into Europe. The Thessalians, when their allies forsook them, no longer wavered, but warmly espoused the side of the Medes, and afterwards, in the course of the war, they were of the very greatest service to Xerxes. The Greeks, on their return to the isthmus, took counsel together concerning the words of Alexander, and considered where they should fix the war, and what places they should occupy. The opinion which prevailed was that they should guard the pass of Thermopylae, since it was narrower than the Thessalian defile, and at the same time nearer to them. Of the pathway by which the Greeks who fell at Thermopylae were intercepted, they had no knowledge, until, on their arrival at Thermopylae, it was discovered to them by the Trachinians. This pass, then, it was determined that they should guard in order to prevent the barbarians from penetrating into Greece through it, and at the same time it was resolved that the fleet should proceed to Artemisium in the region of Histiotis, for as those places are near to one another, it will be easy for the fleet and army to hold communication. The two places may be thus described. Artemisium is where the Sea of Thrace contracts into a narrow channel running between the Isle of Scirphus and the mainland of Magnesia. When this narrow strait is passed, you come to the line of coast called Artemisium, which is a portion of Euboea, and contains a temple of Artemis. As for the entrance into Greece by Trachis, it is at its narrowest point about 50 feet wide. This, however, isn't the place where the passage is most contracted, for it's still narrower a little above and a little below Thermopylae. At Alpini, which is lower down than that place, it's only wide enough for a single carriage, and up above, at the river Phoenix, near the town called Anthela, it's the same. West of Thermopylae rises a lofty and precipitous hill, impossible to climb, which runs up into the chain of Oita, while to the east the road is shut in by the sea and by marshes. In this place are the warm springs which the natives call the cauldrons, and above them stands an altar sacred to Heracles. A wall had once been carried across the opening, and in this there had of old times been a gateway. These works were made by the Phocians through fear of the Thessalians at the time when the latter came from Thesprotia to establish themselves in the land of Ialis, which they still occupy. As the Thessalians strove to reduce Phocis, the Phocians raised the wall to protect themselves, and likewise turned the hot springs upon the pass, so that the ground might be broken up by watercourses, using thus all possible means to hinder the Thessalians from invading their country. The old wall had been built in very remote times, and the greater part of it had gone to decay through age. Now, however, the Greeks resolved to repair its breaches, and here make their stand against the barbarian. At this point there's a village very nigh the road, Alpini by name, from which the Greeks reckoned on getting corn for their troops. These places, therefore, seemed to the Greeks fit for their purpose. Weighing well all that was likely to happen, and considering that in this region the barbarians could make no use of their vast numbers nor of their cavalry, they resolved to await here the invader of Greece. And when news reached them of the Persians being in Pieria, straightway they broke up from the isthmus and proceeded, some on foot to Thermopylae, others by sea to Artemisium. The Greeks now made all speed to reach the two stations, and about the same time the Delphians, alarmed both for themselves and for their country, consulted the god, and received for answer a command to pray to the winds, for the winds would do Greece good service. So when this answer was given them, forthwith the Delphians sent word of the prophecy to those Greeks who were zealous for freedom, and cheering them thereby, amid the fears which they entertained with respect to the barbarian, earned their everlasting gratitude. This done, they raised an altar to the winds at Thyia, where Thyia, the daughter of Cephissus, from whom the region takes its name, has a precinct, and worshipped them with sacrifices. And even to the present day the Delphians sacrifice to the winds because of this oracle. The fleet of Xerxes now departed from Therma, and 10 of the swiftest sailing ships ventured to stretch across direct for Sciathus, at which place there were upon the